Yeah, money doesn't just show up, right? It's like you see it in your mind and you will hold it in your hand. It doesn't even exist of like, you don't just go out and money just shows up. You have to get your mindset right. That is the whole thing about this game, right? Everything is the mindset. So it's not about like, where do you start, or is it the chicken before the egg? It's like everything starts in the mind. Your visions are only your goals are only going to live up to the height of your vision. So that's where it all begins.
Today's episode is a very special one. I've had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Sabri Suby, who is the founder of King Kong, which is one of Australia's leading digital marketing agencies. King Kong begun with $50, a headset in his bedroom, which he will talk about, and now has boasted over 200,000 customers across 136 countries with more than 7.8 billion in sales delivered. Aside from that, we spoke about him, his life, strategic growth and marketing insights, how to overcome adversity, the importance of storytelling in business, how to balance professional ambition with personal life, lessons for entrepreneurs with innovation, the future plans of King Kong, advice for other entrepreneurs and marketers, and some other components. I'm doing an intro today because he's a very hard man to get a hold of and time was limited, so I wanted to dig into the actual episode as quickly as possible. Hope you enjoy. Sabri, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
I got to say, just before we start the podcast, a bit of a side note. You are one of the instrumental marketing guides that I've had in my life. So it's a nice little full circle moment to have you here talking to you. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for being on. Your book was one of the main marketing books that affected the way me and my friend, a business partner and marketing coordinator for one of my businesses, approached a lot of our work over the last 5 years. So good shit.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad I could help you without ever meeting you. That's the whole goal. That's why I put out the content, is to send the elevator back down, so to speak, and to help people. And either I can do that. It's great to hear from your story.
Of course. So if you could give us an elevator pitch of who you are, what you do, and how you're trying to contribute to the world, what would that sound like?
I guess these things are always difficult. So
they're meant to be.
Yeah. Like in terms of like what I'm known for and
who
like
are
the
you?
world, yeah, like the world that I operate in is obviously in the world of business building. In terms of who I am the internet daddy, right? That is the name that the internet people have given me. No, I basically, my whole business is centered around like this problem that we're obsessed with about how do I get more customers, and solving that for as many of our clients as possible. Whether it's through our books or courses or our agency or everything like that. I believe that business is a huge vehicle to drive a lot of change in the world. I grew up, raised by a single parent mother in a house that had a lack of money. And so for me, in the very beginning, it was just like, how do I not be broke? That was the mission 101. And then once I succeeded in that for myself, it was more so about, how can I help a lot of other people solve these problems? Because there's enough problems in the world, and I believe that money shouldn't be one of them. So if that's the only value add that I can do in terms of like the flavor that I can bring to the world and to my community, I believe it's the righteous one.
Yeah, brilliant. And that leads me into one of my questions, which is, how did the scarcity mentality, being raised in a single mother family, similar to me, my mum, like when I was 8, my parents got divorced, and we really struggled from like 8 till about 15. And I know that scarcity mentality is really, really strong. So, how did you begin to shed that to become the man who you are now, to scale the business to where it is? And what are you doing to shed who you are now to scale to the next development of who you are and where your business goes?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's a long process to get rid of that scarcity mindset. It's definitely not like a flick of the switch. Even once you get to a place where you have money, you don't have that abundance mindset yet, right?
So what is an abundance mindset to you, do you think?
Well, it's in a situation where you don't act from a place of scarcity, and you're constantly worried about, how much things cost, and you're scared to invest in greater things because you believe to some degree in your soul that there is a scarcity of the thing, right? When there isn't a scarcity of money, like there is absolutely no scarcity of money. They print this shit all the time. It's out there, right? And it's just, there is a scarcity of it in your bank account in the beginning. And then even once there isn't a scarcity in it, you know, the character traits and the beliefs that are formed from having a lack of money are the things that transpire longer than after that money is in your bank account. And so realistically, it was a continuous process for me of shedding that. And it starts with small things. Like, you know, I remember when I used to go to restaurants is like letting the price of the meal completely dictate what I ordered off the menu, right? And that was something that was still a habit like further on after I started to get money, right? Or wanting to like nickel and dime over small things that weren't worth the value of my time, like returning items and doing these things where it's like I could go and I'd have to call up some return center and spend like an hour on the phone and return something that is like $25. And then I was just like caught myself and just being like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, you are so stupid. Like, your time is worth so much more than this.
It's part of the hustle, right? It's part of the hustle mentality.
Correct. So, you know, when you're like rationing out all of your money and when you've been in a place where you've been very broke, which I have been multiple times in my life, those things are just ingrained in you. And it's like all the decisions that you make are purely based off money. And like not having money. And then as you get more and more money and then you have abundance in that area, you need to basically just have that conversation of first figuring out how much your time is worth to you, right? And the great exercise is just to look at the total amount of profit that you generate in your business and then just divide that by the number of hours that you work.
So how much is your time worth to you if you can if you want to disclose?
Yeah, look, in terms of like for me, it changed, right? It used to just be a monetary figure, right? And my figure was basically I wouldn't do anything that I could outsource that was less than $5,000 an hour. And then that has obviously vastly gone up over the years. But then it changed because I had 3 children, right? And then I was trading in a commodity that was non-renewable, which was my time. And every hour that I spent away from my children or away from my family, it wasn't something that I could go out and create that additional revenue in my business, which I was able to use to justify all of those decisions in the past. And I was actually trading with something that was infinitely more valuable than money, which was the time and the time with my family, with my children that I won't ever get back, right? At this young and precious age that they are in. So now it's even more ruthless, the lens that I put the decisions that I make through. But realistically, it's about getting clear of what that value of your time is. And you don't have to be a business owner to do that, right? That's what a lot of people think. Oh, I'm just talking about business. No. It's like if you earn a salary, right? And you earn $70,000 per year, right? And so you know, okay, I earn $35 an hour. You should not do tasks that you can outsource for less than that.
Unless you love the task.
There's some debate there. So look, you do definitely need to do things that you do get enjoyment from, right? But a lot of the times that is also the scarcity mindset masquerading, and it's kind of pretend to you that you enjoy it just because you don't want to pony up and do the real thing and outsource or delegate or delete that task.
Fair enough. So that's another stage of that mindset, that mentality of scarcity. Unless it's like completely and unequivocally invaluable. Right?
Yeah, like you have to have a look at like what is it that you're optimizing for and what's important for you, because there might be a task, like it's very easy to delegate an automated task that you don't enjoy.
Yeah.
That's like the easiest shit in the world. The difficult thing is to take the things that you really hold precious to you, that you really enjoy, and then to outsource or delegate them, right?
Until you're only left with the how yeses.
Yeah, and that's just like you asked me at the start of this is like, and then what is it that you're needing to shed that you're doing right now to get to that next level? Well, that's the exercise, right? It's when I'm having to start to not do things that I really enjoy doing in my business and my life in order to unlock that higher level. Because that's the transformation that you must go through. Well, I say you must. That's the transformation that I must go through that I have found that is like the linchpin to unlocking all of those new levels is then really starting to break off the things that you even start enjoying to, get to that brighter future.
So there are two things I was thinking here, and just a quick note. It's really, from what I understand, it's like mindset before bank account. You're only going to get to the amount of money in your life that you can actually bring in through your mindset. So
yeah, money doesn't just show up, right? It's like you see it in your mind and you will hold it in your hand. It doesn't even exist of like, you don't just go out and money just shows up. You have to get your mindset right. That is the whole thing about this game, right? Everything is the mindset. So it's not about like, where do you start, or is it the chicken before the egg? It's like everything starts in the mind. Your visions are only your goals are only going to live up to the height of your vision. So that's where it all begins.
It's whenever somebody is going through it, and it's a friend of mine, and I watch the struggle, I have this same thing that I go to, which is if you look around the world at every single thing that you see, it's been built by somebody with an idea. And that is a very powerful concept that you can apply to everything that you do. Because going to the stars, going to the moon, building rockets, high rises, all these buildings, all of these wonderful things that we've created have come with a single person planted with an idea. And you can be one of those people. So, anyone listening to that, there's your daily dose of motivation. So have you done therapy, and was that valuable to your development for your business and like your family? What's your relationship with therapy?
It's non-existent. I haven't done therapy. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't do therapy. I have always been in a place that I have been very self-aware, I think. And for me, I see the value, for some people to go out there and to get clarity around a problem and to maybe have somebody help them step through that problem. And for me, I've always felt like, I need to look inward, not outward, for a lot of the things, the issues that I work with. And that's the reason that I have never looked to it. I've always thought that like a lot of the answers that are within me, and I need to kind of sit there and reflect on those things for long extended periods of time, and make the changes that I need, because while, of course, there is a huge amount of value in having somebody else from the outside look at things, I think there's also a undervalued value assigned to being self-aware enough to be able to see those problems and then also help yourself work through them. That's
because the work that you do and the things that you say and the way you communicate and the way that you've developed into your importance of family and the business understanding, it is a very nuanced and deep understanding. So where did that self-awareness come from, and how did you build on it over time?
I think it's by spending time alone and really thinking about stuff for long extended periods of time.
How long? What do you like? Do you go away by yourself?
Well, my whole life, right? Like a lot of these things, it's not like I go up into the mountains into like a pine forest hut and sit there and then the answers just come to me. Like
it's an option.
It's like whenever, like, the more complex and harder the problems and the more self-reflection that's kind of needed, I try and carve out time to do a lot of thinking. And
on a daily basis, or like, is it a day of the week? Like, how do you approach that?
It's definitely daily, right? I feel like, I employ 100 people. I have thousands of clients. I have hundreds of thousands of customers, and there's constant inputs and constant people vying for my time and attention. And then there's constant leveling up that I need to do as a leader as well. And unless I take that time of solitude, then I don't have anything to give back to anybody, right? And I'm only as good as the amount of energy that I've got. And I get taxed from energy. Everything is like push, 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 and no reflection. So yeah, I try to keep my mind as clean as I can. It's not, I'm not a monk. There's
maybe one day.
There's definitely, it's a constant battle to do that. But it's something that I'm conscious of anyway.
Of course. And how do you maintain that energy for business and your family long term to be as present as possible in all of those endeavors?
First thing is just managing your energy, managing your physical being and your fitness and your health and, what it is that you do. So I spend time in nature. I go for nature walks every day. I rigorously work out. I hit saunas, cold plunges, all of that kind of stuff to make sure. And I track and measure and monitor my sleep and make sure that, sleep's a huge thing. For me, it might not be for everybody, but it's definitely a big one for me.
Gotta be, bro. It's the foundation.
Yeah. And so I just try to do the fundamentals and keep the main things the main things. It's not really rocket science. I don't put some sea green moss under my ass or just some weird shit that gives me some energy. I just do the fundamentals. I try to eat clean. I try to move my body. I try to get sleep and recover and then give myself enough space both physically and mentally to recharge.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's do you know Seneca? Do you know much of the Stoics? Yeah, I just recently read the Daily Stoic book, and one of the key points that stood out to me was Seneca just talking about the importance of walking. So he was like, you got a problem, go for a walk. You've had a breakup, go for a walk. You've just eaten, go for a walk. All of these things solved by going for a walk.
I've read a lot of the Stoic stuff and Marcus Aurelius and stuff, and they were all fans of walking. I'm definitely a huge fan of it. It's a form of meditation. It allows the mind to breathe. It allows you to think about things that you don't when you're sedentary. And we're designed to walk.
Yeah, of course. And it's interesting that your role in the world right now is to optimize for attention towards you. Yet the way you do that is by having as much attention removed from the world around you. It's an interesting juxtaposition of the two experiences. So it's anyone listening, I feel like to do good things, you need to create space. So get off that phone for a minute, no inputs. Do you do when you go for walks and stuff, is it usually no phone, how's your headspace? It's
50-50, depending on the length of my walk and what it is that I need to do. But yeah, so a part of it is definitely sometimes I hold meetings on my phone. If I need to make a meeting, instead of jumping on a Zoom, I will, go out for a walk and do that. But whether or not it's, I have a meeting that day, there will always be a portion of that time that is just me defragging my brain and just unloading it and letting the RAM cool down and get ready for the next sprint. And then if it happens that day is lots of meetings while I'm walking, then, when I'm in the sauna, it's nothing. So there's definitely always, I try to carve out all of that period of time in the day that I can do that.
Yeah, brilliant. There's that saying where it's a healthy man wants 1,000 things and a sick man wants one thing. So, and the foundations of that are exactly what you're saying. I fundamentally agree. Exercise, movement, sun, good food, and just nourishing relationships. So,
yeah, and most people know it, but yet they still feel the need to have to listen to Andrew Huberman 52-hour podcasts when it's they're not even doing the fundamentals yet, and it's what you need to be doing. Stop listening to podcasts and just do it.
Stop listening to this podcast. Turn it off right now.
Well, whether it's this podcast or it's even my content or the stuff, I'm not attacking a particular person or a medium. It's just it's just that minutia of staying on the content treadmill and thinking that there is some secret little word that someone's going to whisper to you that's just going to swing this big door and everything's going to happen if you're not currently doing the fundamentals. And it's this whole societal shift of constant inputs, constant information, always looking, always on, right? When it's how about you just spend a fraction of that time doing the fundamental things, and then when you reach a roadblock or there's a constraint in whatever it is you're trying to optimize, then go out and seek the information.
With intent.
Yeah, and not just mindlessly thinking you're going to stumble across some diamond on the footpath.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big proponent of the idea that dopamine is the biggest problem in our modern society. Dopamine hits, easy dopamine is causing many of the issues that you see around, society these days. And the people who can control their low-level dopamine interactions are the ones that are going to be extremely impactful and powerful over the next 20, 30 years. So, it ties in very, very closely to what you're saying. You briefly spoke, where you've spoken a lot about, your business failures and, the time period in your life where you've really struggled and been at rock bottom. So what was the most impactful story that has happened during that time? And what was the key thing that you took from it that didn't happen again?
I've had because I've had multiple ups and downs, right? There's been lots of different paths on that ascension point. Mm-hmm. But I think the overall thing is just the ability to be really resourceful, right? Mm-hmm. So when I first started my business, I had $50 and an old computer that my girlfriend had bought me. And I took the $50 and I loaded it up into, I think I took $15, I loaded it into a VoIP account. And then the other $35, I went down to the cheapest computer store called MSY and bought a Logitech headset. And that's what I started the business on. Mm-hmm. And I had a 49cc scooter that cost me $7 to fill up that I used to drive my wife around on, right? Mm-hmm. My girlfriend at the time. And it was just purely out of a place of having to be as resourceful as possible. Mm-hmm. And it was so slow and it wasn't a very sexy vehicle at all, right? And just going through that time where it's you have to be so resourceful and to find a way to find a crack to get your way through that crack to make something happen. And I think that is something that you take with you for the rest of your life. And it's those character forming things that make you as a man and that really add to the whole fabric of who you are and, the way that you think of things. Even when I think back now and me and my wife think back at those times, and they're the things that we laugh about and that we talk about and that are fond memories now is how ghetto we were, right? And how we just there was no money and I was literally selling to pay rent and to put food on the table. And when you go through those situations, it's you need those polar opposites to add that color in your life. And it's only when you can appreciate all of these things. It's only once you've been poor can you understand what it's like when you feel you're rich, right?
It's for the plot.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just understanding those and having that contrast. And I think that going through that period where it was no matter what, there's not about the claim to a lack of resources or excuses. The thing that I always used to tell myself in those situations is that all the people that you look up to, all the successful people by and large were in a situation where they came from a place of scarcity and they found a way by hook or by crook, by hell or high water, to just roll up their sleeves and get it done. And the only difference in between you and them is that successful people are willing to do all the things that unsuccessful people aren't willing to do. So all of the excuses that the little bitch in your head is telling you right now about you can't do this or you don't have enough money or these guys are better, well-funded, or all of the little excuses that you've got, all they are is excuses. Right? And that doesn't stop even for the level that I'm at right now and the plateaus that you want to get to. All of the excuses that you tell yourself of why you're not there are just excuses. It's just to a claim of lack of resources when it says you need to be more resourceful. You just need to be better, bro. That's just the answer. Yeah. And so they're the lessons that's a fundamental lesson that I've carried with me. And there is nothing that is more stark contrast in those times where you have absolutely nothing.
Well, on that note, what excuses are you saying to yourself right now? What's the big one that's just floating around in your brain?
It's always you think something is different or you think that the place that you're trying to get to, the people that have arrived there was some different circumstances that allowed them to get there, right? And it's just that saying of you're rewarded in public for the things that you practice intensely in private. And a lot of the stuff that you see, a lot of whatever the field and, the pursuit is, and you listen to people that did not reach the summit of that mountain and they all have these stories, these stories that they tell themselves for their whole life of like why they couldn't get there, right? And it's just a justification to their own self of why they didn't get there. And so I think it's just very important to catch yourself when you're going through those times, and to not allow yourself to reason out of it, and just to say like, you just need to do more. In a world that tells you that you're doing too much, you just need to do more.
Yeah, there's a few threads that I want to jump into, but I want to make a quick note there. Recently, over the last 12 months, so my history is the last 10 years, I made most of the money that I've lived on and invested into through events and festivals and tours. In the last 12 months, it just kind of blew up in the downside, and there's probably about a $300,000 loss that I've just had, and I've taken, we've cancelled festivals, been in the news, all this just like pretty rough stuff. And anyone that I meet in the industry recently has just said, I'm really sorry. It's, it's just tough out there. It's a tough market. It's, there's all these problems, cost of living, blah, 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 blah. And as much as I was, it'd be nice to just be like, it's everyone else's problem. The reality of the situation is your success in life, and this is what I got to, my success in life and in business is purely based on synthesizing information about the world and making good decisions. So the core of it is the decisions that were made weren't good enough. And that's the reality. Like there's nobody else to blame, So I understand, I deeply
the right
understand.
Attitude to have, right? And that's the empowering attitude that you should be looking at, right? Because all of everything that has arrived you to the place that you are right now is nothing more than the decisions that you've made, right? Neither good or bad. That's just the reality of it. And so one way to look at it is through the victim lens, and just to think the timing wasn't good. This was unfortunate. This didn't happen. But it's still, the decisions that arrived you there. And you can use that, that empowering mindset in taking that full ownership to get you to be to that next chapter, because all of this stuff that you've gone through now, this is just a part of your story, right? And it's going to make the story so much more epic when you end it and when you go through it. But it's important. It's an important distinction that you've made of that you've come to the realization that it is you, because it's just like all people are self-made, but only the successful people will admit it. It's like if you're overweight, right? If you don't have money, like all of those things, it's so easy to say, oh, it's this, or it's hormonal, or I grew up in a single parent household, or I grew up in this low socioeconomic area. But then what about all of the people that have all of those things and regardless of those things have still reached the outcome? Because then there's one person that's making the excuses, and then there's other person that's making the outcome. And the person that's making the excuses, that never ever serves you, right? It's like a ball and chain that's just going to weigh you down. And the moment that you can release that is the moment where it's like you empower yourself just to know if it's meant to be, it's up to me. Like it's all of the decisions that I make. Like I try to take responsibility for all of the failures that I have in my business. Is my fault, and I try as much to make sure that all the wins are my team's, right? But I've found that is the most serving, that is the most empowering place to pay for, place to operate from, because then you know that if you want to change the outcome, that it's within your power and it's not within somebody else's power.
How do you do that also without letting it crush you mentally? Because there's a fine line.
I always tell myself the hardest of steel is made in the hottest of fires. So if I want to live a life that other people don't live, then I have to be comfortable in the uncomfortable places that people aren't willing to sit. So I don't wish that it was easy. I have a lot of difficult things that I deal with, right? And that I constantly have to deal with. And I do not wish it was easy, because then other people would be able to also easily cross those mountains, cross those rivers, slay those dragons, right? I get pleasure in knowing that it is very difficult, and that's what makes it valuable.
Do average things get average results?
Yeah, it's like if you want to live an extraordinary life, then you need to do extraordinary things. And by definition, if it's extraordinary, then it can't be easy.
Exactly. When I've been going through this, because this is all quite recent, I jumped on a call with a mentor of mine, and he explained a bit of a situation that he had. I won't name names specifically, but he said to me, he's like, I made some bad calls about, probably would have been like 6, 7, 8 years ago. I got blown up. I had to sell my houses. I was $250,000 in debt. And at the end of the story, he said, he just put his boots on, paid everyone back, like just worked everything he could possibly do to get it done. And ironically, the moment he paid it all back, the artist that he'd managed released a song that blew up. And now fast forward 5, 6, 7 years later, him and that artist, as the manager and the artist, were at the Grammys.
There you go.
It's like,
and that just makes a story more epic, right? That's the hero's journey, right? There has to be that conflict, there has to be that rise and that struggle. Otherwise, it's not a good story. It's just like, I did this and everything worked. Who cares about that story?
Yeah, definitely. How did you maintain resourcefulness while not having the scarcity mentality? Like, what's that line that you then toe?
Yeah, I think that the scarcity mindset in the beginning puts you in a place where you are very resourceful, right? Because you're so conscious and self-conscious around money, right? It's like, I was just like, for the first 3 years of my business, I think collectively me and my wife together earned $25,000 a year. So when I see people that I hire now and being and they struggle to live off 70, 80 grand, I don't know how that is the case, because I have done it. I know. Right? I know what's involved. I know what you need to do. I know how you need to ration. Yeah. So for me, I was very conservative with the money. And even once the money was coming in, we lived very, very frugally, incredibly frugally. And I continued to do so. And it's still a practice that I do, right? I delay gratification on so many things. I recently bought a Ferrari, and it's I was in a position to buy that Ferrari 6 years ago, but I didn't. And it's constantly delaying those gratifications along the way. So I think that the scarcity mindset is also something, it's a double-edged sword, because it can serve you in the beginning, and then it's the thing that holds you back. Because in the beginning, I believe that you do want to be frugal. You do want to hoard away a very healthy amount of cash reserves to be able to withstand some storms, right? Because on the other end of that is people that have money, and then they're abundance mindset. I listen to this mindset training on YouTube, and then they just start spending all of the money, and then they deplete the business, and they don't have any money to give you those cash reserves, and then they can't withstand those storms. So for me, I had a healthy amount of cash in the bank when I hired my first team member, when I got my first office, and that was just because I just lived way below my means for a long period of time.
The frugality piece comes up quite a lot in a lot of the autobiographies that I read or listen to. I think it's a commonality across successful people to just be frugal, but you can be frugal, but you can also spend a lot when the time is right. It's frugal, build the base, and then go hard when it's a call that you've got, a lot of kind of, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but you think it's going to work well. So I think you're I think you're right. And I agree completely with all of that. So what does resourcefulness look like now in I don't know the figures, but a 9-10 figure business? Everyone still needs to be resourceful. Even the Elon Musk of the world building rockets for 10 cents on the dollar versus NASA, they still all need to be resourceful. So what kind of resourcefulness happens now?
Yeah, the frugality is more so around, when you get to a business to a certain stage, the number one most valuable thing that a founder can do is really capital allocation, right? And it's there's so many things to pursue, and there's so many paths to go down, and you just need to ask yourself, is this the best deployment of capital? Is this going to get us the best return? Is it going to position us in a place that we have, a unfair advantage to win? So that's the lens that you look at it around, and it's still about being very intentional with your spend, right? And a lot of that is looking at all of the costs that are coming out and asking yourself, are these things essential? Every single day, somebody comes to me in my business requiring more money for something, right? And so I always need to look at it through the lens of like, is this the thing that is absolutely needed right now? Because there's so many little paper cuts that can bleed a business out. And if you don't worry about all of those things, you know, it all just adds up. And then there's, 80, 100 grand in SaaS subscriptions. And then there's this, and there's salary increases, and there's camera equipment, and there's rent, there's all the things that go on and inflation that's required. So you do need to be very savvy. You do need to look at all the vendors and the relationships that you've got with them, and you need to be as competitive as possible because all of those things add up.
Exactly. A lot of what you say is resonating with kind of the Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger approach. It's like your business is a capital allocator. Can you allocate capital at a certain value, and that threshold needs to be very high. Otherwise, you just don't act. Would you kind of resonate with that?
Yeah, 100%. I'm a big fan of both Warren and Charlie. But that's realistically, even if you just look at it through the most pragmatic lens as possible, it's like, well, what is your job then? Like if you have excess capital and you're the founder of the business and you have a team around you that do a lot of the other stuff, like what are the decisions that you're going to make that are going to have a literally like, it's, like Jeff Bezos has this thing of like, it's, a revolving door decision or it's a non-reversible decision. It's like, can you walk into this and come back out or can you not? And a lot of the time with capital allocation, it's a one-way door.
Yeah, of course. How do you go about managing the paper cuts? Like avoiding the paper cuts that bleed out
having systems in place that you audit those things every 90 days, canceling your credit cards every 6 months and only renewing only the things that pop up that are absolutely essential. Because it's amazing. Sometimes you just cancel the credit card and it's like all the things that are needed bubble to the surface and everything else falls by the wayside.
I love it. I actually love that. That's a good one. You spoke briefly about the little bitch and squashing the little bitch, and I know you talk about that a lot in your book and your content. This is going to be a little bit nuanced, so hopefully I can frame the question okay. There's a therapy technique that I'm exploring at the moment called internal family systems, and basically the idea is that you've got yourself who kind of controls the show, knows what's best, and then you've got versions of you that come up. You might have your little bitch, you might have your angry version of you, you might have your fifth. All of these little pieces come around and they're their own people. They have their own goals and their own desires. And sometimes they take over and they take control of, the whole. And then the result is maybe decision-making that isn't best for the whole. And when I hear, squashing the little bitch, do you think, to steel man the other side, what value do you think the healthy version of the little bitch has in life?
He's not healthy. He's a greedy little sucker. And he only cares about him, right? He's a parasite that lives within you and he wants to suck up all the resources to the betterment of his own self because that little bitch never ever tells you to do the things that you should do. He only tells you to take the easy path. So there is no merit listening to that little sucker. And I refuse to spend any time in giving him any acknowledgement and to giving him any words of encouragement and telling him that he is good because there is nothing good about him. He is the dark passenger and he must be suffocated.
I love that. So, well, that ties into my next question pretty well. How do you manage to work effectively when you were doing 18-hour days and how did you manage to know when it was too much?
I was definitely not working effectively, right? Okay. I was simply... It's not about always like optimizing and getting the absolute most out of the juice out of the orange, right? I was just going and buying as many oranges as I possibly can. And that was the game that I was in. It was like, I didn't have a choice. I was like, hunting by day and farming by night. So it's not like, was I the most efficient? Was I managing my energy? Was my sleep dialed in? Hell no. There was no balance. It was absolute all-out war, right? And that was the place that I needed to go to get myself out of the place that I have arrived myself in from the decisions that I have made that arrived me in a place that I was broke. And I was just about to be married. And my wife had just made it a commitment with me to spend the rest of her life with me. And I definitely have a more traditional mindset of that. I am like, I grew up without a father, right? And so for me, when I started my family, I knew what it is that I wanted to be as a man because I never had that as a father. So I was very clear on what it is that I wanted to bring to the party and the type of man that I wanted to be, not only for my wife, but for my children that weren't born yet. And so when I made that decision and I knew what it is that I wanted to be, and there was a disparity of where I was right now from the decisions that I had made as a man and where I knew that I needed to be, there was no amount of fire that I wasn't willing to walk through to get there. Right. So I wasn't thinking about balance. I was thinking I will do whatever it takes to get out of this situation. And that's basically what I did. And there's a time and place for those things, right? Like I would say to anybody that's starting a business, like a business is either started out of a place of motivation or desperation, right? And for me, it was the desperation. And so when you're in that situation, there is no balance. And the whole notion that things need to be balanced and you need to be, a well-balanced individual, yeah, that is the case. But that doesn't mean that you don't need to go through periods of incredible unbalance. And you do, right? And I think that you need to understand what season you're in your life. And you need to understand what is the cost of success looking like for where you are and where you want to go, and are you willing to pay that price? And that doesn't mean that everything is going to be able to be balanced. It's the opposite of that. There will be no balance throughout those certain periods.
It's a matter of sprinting and then resting and then sprinting and then resting. Is that kind of what you do now, or is it a bit more kind of flowy?
It's like I say that like entrepreneurship is a long distance run, right? It is not a sprint. However, that doesn't mean you start at a slow pace. In order to get up to that pace, you have to ramp up, right? And in the beginning, in that journey with everybody in that scene, it's like you have to have that intense sprinting. And it's not like there's not even a rest. It was continuously sprinting for like 9 months straight. I told myself when I started my business, I was like, you are going to go underwater with no oxygen and you are not going to come up for air for 3 years. And I don't care what the other business objects shiny objects pop up for you, what other business ventures there are, all of these people that come to you with these great ideas, all these once in a lifetime opportunities, you're not going to do any of them. Right? And you could have to put the blinders on and be in this position for 3 years. And only after 3 years are you allowed to look at anything else. I don't care how hard it gets. I don't care about how long you have to work. I don't care anything of how treacherous the path ahead lies. You have to walk this thing. And it was only realistically once I did that and I burnt the boats, did things change for me.
Yeah, brilliant. And who are you looking up to at the moment? Like who's inspiring you?
For me, I've always been inspired by people that have been able to make something out of nothing as one group. And I don't care what that individual is, right? I got a lot of inspiration from my mother, watching my mum hold down 3 jobs and raise me and my daughter, still put us into a good school, still cook healthy meals for us every night, and being in a position where it would be so easy to throw the towel in and think like this is a role that's meant for 2 people. How am I meant to do this? But she never did and she never complained, right? That's one school. And then the other people that I find a lot of inspiration in anybody that's really passionate about whatever it is that they do. And they are at the absolute top of their game, right? Whether it's a chef or it's a tennis player or it's a script writer, I like people that are obsessed. I don't care what the discipline is. I love looking at people that are obsessed and that have this obsession for what it is that they do, that they just lose themselves. They lose themselves in the game that it is that they're playing. And they're willing to go to those extremes because usually the outputs in those situations are remarkable.
Have you watched the movie Jiro Dreams of Sushi by any chance?
I have.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's amazing. Just that obsession and that drive for perfection and the art of – I realize there's just art in every single career you can possibly do.
Yeah, and the Japanese they're incredible for that. They
Amazing.
do anything that they do, they turn into an art form, right? Whether it's raking, a stone garden, or if it's boiling the rice, or if it's any of those things. And that's the beautiful thing about the world, right? Is like you can be passionate about anything and turn anything into a business. It's like there are endless stories of people that have taken the most basic things and turned them incredible things by just having this incredible obsession with their passion, and making it something that is remarkable.
Exactly. What are you obsessed with learning right now?
I would say that a constant obsession for me is definitely storytelling. It's something that I'm definitely working on right now, and leveling up in this new transformation that I'll be going through as a business builder, is the art of storytelling, because it's the most timeless principle and it compounds, and I can apply it to all the different areas of my life and my business.
And at scale.
And it has, even deep depths with like my family and raising children and coming up with, values and visions and things like that to install in them. It all comes down to my ability to tell great stories.
Yeah, for sure. I like it. And you're an Australian ad man now. Like you're well known in the advertising space, and there's a lot of people, that I'm sure you learned from. Do you have an ideal person that you think you learned from, like alive or dead, like Ogilvy, Cloud Hopkins, like Gary Halbert? Who would be your favorite ad person and why?
I definitely learned a lot early on in my career. Well, I'd say early on. The interesting thing about me is that, like, I started in sales when I was 16 years old, and I did sales for, I think, 6 years before I read my first sales book. And that was when I was like, I literally, the only thing that I did was split tested it on the telephone, what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah.
And then, so it's very different to how a lot of people learn things these days. A lot of people learn them and then they do them, where I did them and then I learned about becoming conscious about the things that I was doing subconsciously that made me successful. And then the same thing happened early on when I graduated from selling one-to-one to selling one-to-many, is that I did a bunch of courses and I read a couple of books, and then I applied the learnings that I did and nothing was working. And then I was like, I started to question like the people that I was learning from. And I started to do some due diligence around that. And then I really kind of came familiar with this concept of like source knowledge and going back to like the truest form of the source knowledge, and not having some like regurgitated crap or having somebody that is like an armchair expert that wasn't doing the thing that they were talking about doing, or had never done the thing, or had done the thing a long time ago and they were reminiscing from their ivory tower about how things used to work and not how they work right now. And it was only once I put all of that stuff to bed and I was like, this stuff doesn't work. Just do what you're doing over the telephone, Sabri, and just write it down and try to make it appeal to a big group of people instead of one person. And I went from making 150 cold calls a day to writing ads that would cold call on 150,000 business owners a day. And that was like a big ascension point. And then after I did that, I kind of fell down like the world of direct response and copywriting and digital marketing. And then I found, the Halberts, the Ogilvies, the Claude Hopkins, the Eugene Schwartz, and all the OGs of the rap game, and was like, oh, like Ogilvy, he sold ovens door to door, right? That's very similar to what I was doing. And a lot of these guys, like, Halbert was a door-to-door encyclopedia salesperson. And then like they all did like what it is that I did. And then they also started to write sales messages. And I was like, so I'm not the only one that kind of figured that out, right? And so then I kind of got a grounding and a fundamental. I think like there are important distinctions to be made against like the traditional school and what I would call as the new school. And for as much as I love a lot of those guys and they're the OGs, a lot of these guys didn't have to compete in the chaotic world that is the internet. And I feel like, that the world that we operate in right now is very, very different. While human beings are the same, the consumption patterns of information and the skepticism and all the barriers to entry that have been removed by the internet have made it a very different place to market in. And so I like to look at myself as one of the pioneers of the new school of the combination of what used to work and what works now. Because a lot of the methodologies that I run today aren't things that I learnt about in books. A lot of it is hard-won lessons that I have learnt from spending, $100 million on ads. That coupled with being in a unique position where I've made over 1 million cold calls and forging what works. But I'd probably say if there is one OG, I'd probably have to give it to Ogilvy. And I'd probably give it to him because unlike Halbert, Halbert was a gangster, but all the brands that he marketed, by and large, aren't around today, right? And Ogilvy has built brands that have stood the test of time. And the company. Yeah. And it's that's the thing that I look at as being success, is something that can withstand for decades beyond you.
So for anyone listening and curious about what we're talking about and doesn't understand, it's basically these guys were core at copywriting and how to place an ad and what, to the point of what type of text would you use, and would you use a white or black background, sorry. And one of the core books that Ogilvy has is, Ogilvy on advertising. And then another one that he says is really important is he's got this quote that says, if you haven't read Scientific Advertising 7 times, you're not an ad man. So they're probably the two that I would recommend. And I don't know if you would recommend the same if you're going down that path.
Yeah, I'd say if anything, it would be Scientific Advertising. That's the source information for Ogilvy, right? That's where he kind of got a lot of his information, and then obviously iterated on that over the time. But if there's one book that I would recommend, it would be to buy Scientific Advertising by Claude Hopkins. And then I would stop at that point and I would read no more books on copywriting. And I would move to only reading proven pieces of advertising every day for 180 days. And then after you have done that, I would begin writing ads. If you aren't in a position where you have products and services to sell the things that you do have, whether it's yourself on a dating app or it's an old couch on the Gumtree. Or
I've been doing that. It's so funny. It's just the most ridiculous.
Yeah, and or help friends out and do it for friends. But just nothing will get you good. People just obsess and they read about this stuff forever. You just need to do it. You need to do it every day, and you need to get the reps in, because no amount of reading is going to make you good. Yeah,
for sure. It's a combination of learning, applying, iterating, learning, applying, iterating. That's kind of the wheelhouse that actually gets you anywhere. For sure. I'm conscious of your time. So would you mind if we jump into a few rapid fires and then I can get out of your hair?
Yeah.
What's one thing that you've changed your mind on over the last 2 years that was important to you previously?
That's no longer important to me?
Yeah.
I think probably having one of the transitions that I'm going through right now as a leader is surrendering even more control to my management team. And I think everyone falls into the ego trap a lot of the time, including myself, of you think that you're way more important than you actually are. And for me, for a long period of time, I haven't wanted to surrender having meetings with my teams because I felt that I was such a crucial part in the way things run. And so for me, one of the things that I've identified this year, in order for me to get to where it is that I want to go, I naturally have to do things that I haven't been doing in the past, or I have to remove things that I have been doing to free up myself to do things that I haven't been doing. And for me, that's been looking at removing those meetings with my team and just focusing on the bigger picture and things that are going to create more opportunity for everybody.
Yeah. So, and that is storytelling at scale, Is that the main thing you're looking at?
Yeah, that's a key part of what I'm doing. But just by definition, I need to do things radically different to what I have been doing in order to get a different outcome. And so that's something that I tell my students, my clients, my team to do all the time. And, the first rule of leadership is to lead yourself, and it's a constant evolution that you need to constantly leading. And that's the path that I'm walking.
Cool. And what's the kindest thing someone's done for you?
I think it would definitely have to be my mum in realistically sacrificing a lot of her life to provide an incredible upbringing for me and instill those values to me. It's probably the most selfless thing that you can do. And I would say that would be without measure the kindest thing.
I love it. I thought you might say that. And if you could only recommend one book to someone to read for their whole lifetime to have the most outsized impact, what would it be?
Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
I love that. Is there anything you're excited about at the moment that you'd like to let the listeners in on?
I'm excited about everything, right? I am seriously, I try to have it as my natural state of being excited. One of my sales guys recently bought me this big poster on my wall that I look at every day of how many weeks that I've got left to live.
Oh, I've got the same one. It scares the shit out of people.
It does. And so one of the things that I just think that is really important, and it's probably the most underrated thing, and it's one of my biggest goals, is just to have fun all the time. The thing that is the biggest equalizer is time. And there's no point doing any of this stuff, doing podcasts, running a business, making money, creating videos, doing anything if you're not having fun. That is the whole purpose of it, is to have a good time while you're here, because we're not all here forever. Our time comes and goes, right? And we will be nothing more than a whisper in the wind. So you just got to make sure that you're having a lot of fun and you're excited about life and it gets you pumped up, because before you know it, it will be gone. Was
this fun to you?
Yeah, I had some fun.
I love it. And where can people find you if they're interested in knowing more?
Anywhere with my name, Sabri Suby, on it. And if you can't find me, I will find you.
Yeah, I love it. And the last question, what do you think the why of all of this is? What do you think the meaning of life is?
I think it comes back to what I was just saying, is to have fun, right? And to have a good time. That's ultimately what is you can keep asking that question over and over and over and over again and boil it down and boil it down. And regardless of what the outcome that you arrive at, if you're not having fun, then why?
Yeah.
Why do any of it? So I think that having fun is probably the most underrated thing. And as you get older and older in life, the world tries to kind of beat you down to being vanilla and make you fit into a certain box and to act a certain way. We're all children at heart, right? Children are the most pure sense of having fun and excitement there is. My children are a very big reminder for me every single day. And just is nothing more, if you take nothing more away from this podcast, is just look at your life and think, how could I make everything that I'm doing right now twice as fun? And whatever the answer is, go and do that.
I love it. Thank you, Sabri. I really appreciate your time, your energy. You're a huge inspiration to me and I'm sure many others. So until next time.
No problems. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course.